Recently, we've seen loads of pretty questionable pop song lawsuits. Blurred Lines versus Marvin Gaye, Ed Sheeran versus Marvin Gaye, Katy Perry versus a Christian rapper. A lot of these lawsuits that are claiming that one artist plagiarised another artist are often fairly obvious money grabs. The similarities that they're arguing for between the two songs often come down to pretty generic building blocks of music. Scales, chords, general aesthetics. These aren't things that you can own, these aren't things that you can copyright. And yet, most of these lawsuits are based on these principles. A painter would be called absurd to sue another painter for using the same shade of blue as them, but yet this is basically what we're seeing in the world of pop music at the moment. Really, plagiarism and influence are the same thing. They are two poles to the same spectrum. Of course, if a new song comes out and it's obviously copying the basic characterful elements of another song, then it's going to wind up here. It's obviously plagiarism. But if a new song comes out that has taken inspiration from another song, but this song has actually developed the source material into something new and interesting and separate from the original, then this would fall on this end of the spectrum. It would be a case of influence, not a case of plagiarism. And songs on this end of the spectrum really don't deserve to be sued. So today we're going to run through a whole bunch of different songs that were quite clearly influenced by other hits that came before them. And you can decide whether you think it's plagiarism or if it's influence. Several One Direction songs sound strikingly similar to other classic songs. For example, One Direction's Midnight Memories, released 2013, sounds suspiciously like Pour Some Sugar on Me by Def Leppard. So after hearing those two clips back to back, you might be thinking, how on earth did One Direction get away with ripping off Def Leppard like that? Well, Def Leppard and their legal team did take a look at this song, but they concluded that the only similarities came down to the essential building blocks of rock music. Vivian Campbell, the guitarist from Def Leppard, said, "The chords are 1, 4, 5. Those are the blues. You don't get any more basic than that. I think what's more reminiscent of the Leppard thing here is the production, the sound, the vocals, the reverb, and the way that it's assembled." And this isn't the only time that a rock legend has given One Direction the benefit of the doubt when it comes to plagiarism. One Direction's track Best Song Ever also came under fire for its apparent similarities to Barbara O'Reilly by The Who. Pete Townsend from The Who responded saying that the band would not be taking legal action. "I liked the single, I like One Direction. The chords I used and the chords they used are the same three chords we've all been using in basic pop music since Buddy Holly, Eddie Cochran and Chuck Berry made it clear that fancy chords don't mean great music." One Direction aren't quite off the hook yet though. The riff from their song Live While You're Young seems to be heavily inspired by another classic rock song. Harry Styles actually admits that the band intentionally lifted the riff from Should I Stay or Should I Go? Despite this open admission though, the Clash don't seem to have acknowledged the similarities or pursued a lawsuit. Likewise, Harry Styles has also admitted that the intro to That's What Makes You Beautiful purposefully mimics the riff from Grease's Summer Nights. But just like with the Def Leppard case, the Summer Nights riff is arguably too generic to own. The riff is built purely from the chords 1, 4 and 5, the three most common chords in all of Western music. And in fact the Summer Nights riff was itself probably ripped off from another earlier song, Hang On Sloopy, made famous by the McCoys in 1965. As I'm sure you're aware, One Direction don't generally write their own songs. They're written for them by a team of songwriters. And I actually believe that it was the strategy of these songwriters to take little bits of classic pop and rock songs and splice them in to these One Direction hits to give these hits a bit more of a sense of authenticity or timelessness, and perhaps to even intentionally stir up a bit of controversy to help popularise the song. Anyway, this video wasn't meant to all be about One Direction, so let's take a look at some other artists who have worn their influences on their sleeves. The guitar riff from Green Day's song Warning sounds almost identical to the riff from the Kinks' Picture Book. And this isn't the only riff that Green Day have borrowed. The opening riff from their track Brain Stew is very similar to the riff from Chicago's 25 or 6 to 4. The harmonica intro to Green Day's Hold On is clearly inspired by the harmonica intro to the Beatles' I Should Have Known Better. As far as I'm aware, none of these instances of Green Day songs sounding like other songs have ever led to a lawsuit, and nor am I saying that they should. I think that in all of these cases, Green Day have taken something old, something that they admired, and worked it into something new and valuable. Let's take a look at some other artists who have done some questionable borrowing. Danny California by the Red Hot Chili Peppers sounds strikingly akin to Tom Petty's Mary Jane's Last Dance. Petty did confirm that he had noticed the similarities between Danny California and his song, but said that he would not be pursuing legal action. I seriously doubt that there is any negative intent there. A lot of rock and roll songs sound alike. I don't believe in lawsuits much. I think there are enough frivolous lawsuits in this country without people fighting over pop songs. In fact, Mary Jane's Last Dance was actually most likely ripped off from another song. Tom Petty probably got his inspiration from the Jayhawks track Waiting for the Sun. The Jayhawks were the opening act for Tom Petty in 1992, and Mary Jane's Last Dance was released in 1993, so there is a real chance that Petty was at least subconsciously inspired by the Jayhawks. For this next example, I'm just going to play you a short snippet of the song that was ripped off, and I'm pretty sure even from that short snippet you're going to be able to tell me which artist did the ripping off. Any guesses? Nirvana's Come As You Are is pretty clearly based on Killing Joke's song 80s. The two riffs are melodically similar, but not melodically identical. However, I think that the similarities between them have been accentuated by the fact that both are performed on a chorus-affected guitar. The Jam are one of those many bands that are understandably inspired by the Beatles. For example, the Jam's track Start is a pretty overt display of this influence. The two bass riffs are virtually identical. The Jam have just stuck one extra note onto the end of the bass line to make it sound a little bit different. The Jam were apparently so obsessed with this Taxman bass line that they actually used it on the B-side to start as well, Liza Radley. But the Beatles themselves though have definitely borrowed ideas from other artists. The Beatles' track Sun King from Abbey Road has a very similar sound to Albatross by Fleetwood Mac. both tracks are in the same key and feature very similar parts and tones on the guitar, bass and drums. Now, I would say that this example is far closer to the influence end of the scale than the plagiarism end. George Harrison said, "When we were writing Abbey Road, Albatross was out with all the reverb on the guitars. So we said, let's be Fleetwood Mac doing Albatross just to get going." The Beatles may have taken Albatross as a kicking off point, but what they came up with in the end was a distinctly different piece of music. What does this one remind you of? This is probably yet another example of a classic being used as a starting point to write a new song. The first two beats of Dodgy's Staying Out for the Summer and Blue Oyster Cult's Don't Fear the Reaper are melodically identical, and are both played with similar electric guitar tones. Let's look at some more recent examples. What does this song remind you of? Listen, baby, your wish is my command. Treasure by Bruno Mars, released 2013, has some obvious similarities to Baby I'm Yours by Breakbot, released 3 years earlier in 2010. The main similarity is in this melodic hook that both songs use in the heart of their chorus. Breakbot, the artist who wrote Baby I'm Yours, called Treasure a rip-off of their song. However, they also said that they were cool with it, admitting that they themselves had taken lots of bits from here and there when creating their own music. With this next example, I'm far from the first person to point out these similarities. As I said, if you've noticed these similarities before, you're certainly not alone. The band themselves, Portugal the Man, were also fully aware of the similarities between their track and Please Mr. Postman, so they went ahead and secured the rights to the song before release, crediting the writers of Please Mr. Postman on their track. The use of Please Mr. Postman in Feel It Still doesn't really constitute calling Feel It Still a cover, but also it isn't a sample. They haven't taken the sample of Please Mr. Postman and spliced it into Feel It Still. What we're looking at here is something different called interpolation. Interpolation is when the melody or part of the melody of an existing song is taken and worked into a new song. Now, the most recent example I have for you today is Lewis Capaldi's 2018 hit Someone You Loved. Many people have noticed the similarities this song has with the song Dragon's Die Tai by Ozone, perhaps better known as I could show you the two tracks back to back to demonstrate the similarities, but what I think will do a better job is this version by songwriter Owen Denver.
It's all or nothing really got away and driving me crazy. I need some Maya here, some Maya who, some Maya ha, some Maya ha, it's Maya here, it's Maya who. I guess I kinda like the way you knew me, but now the day bleeds into new.
The important thing to remember with all of this is that culture and music don't exist in a vacuum. Every piece of music you've ever heard was effectively a rehash of something that came before it, a new spin on an old classic. And that's how culture is meant to happen and develop. Like I said before, culture is one ongoing conversation. Of course, I'm not saying that everyone should be allowed to use everything. If a songwriter or a producer has worked really hard to create a piece of music, they should be allowed a time to exclusively profit from that, so their hard work is rewarded. But that's what copyright is there for. The idea of copyright is to incentivize creativity, but nowadays it's often abused by corporations who just want to squeeze as much money as they can out of the intellectual properties they have. To finish off, I'll show you this clip of Albert Hammond, who wrote the Hollies hit The Air That I Breathe. The Air That I Breathe was infamously ripped off by Tom York when he wrote the Radiohead classic Creep. Because of this, Hammond was awarded a third of Creep's royalties and a writing credit. But Hammond didn't actually want to sue Radiohead, and it wasn't even him who sued them, it was his publisher.
All these lawsuits and all these things, I think it's silly, you know, I really do. It shouldn't be about money, and it shouldn't be about egos. It should be about love and wonderful things. That's what I feel.
So I'm sure you guys will have plenty more examples in the comments of songs that plagiarise other songs, so I'm excited to see those. And I'm sure you've all got lots of opinions about copyright, so let loose in the comment section below and I'll try and reply to as much as I can. Also, a massive thank you goes to all of you subscribers who have got me over the 90k mark. That's actually absurd that we're now honing in on 100,000 subscribers. That's crazy. If we do get to 100,000 subscribers, I'm going to do a Q&A. So if you have any questions you want to ask about me, or what I do, or how I make these videos, or about any songs that you like, stick it in the comments below and I'll do my best to reply to as many as I can. And a massive thank you, as always, goes to my incredibly generous supporters on Patreon. If you enjoy my videos and you want to see more of them, perhaps consider lending a hand over on Patreon. For example, a pledge of $5 gets you on this list of legends, including Andre Sainz-Diaja, Andrew Brown, Andy Deacon, Austin Barrett, Bob McKinstry, Chris Cabell, Christopher Ryan, Kieran Bennon, Daniel Long, Daryl, Darren Harvey, David Defenderfer, David M. Berry, Esben Hansen, Eyes, FD Hodor, George Taylor, Golfhouse, James Ko, J.A. Cockensparger, Joe Vasson, Jonas Soderstrom, Jonathan Banks, Justin Vigor, Meg Fellows, Melody Composer Squared, Nancy Gillard, Nicholas, Orlando Bernard, Paul Muller, Paul Pazel, Peter Dunphy, Roger Clay, Summer Ray, T. Newport, Tim Beaker, and Vladimir Kodakov.
You said I was trying to pretend that I was Marvin Gaye. When you were creating
the feeling of the music.
Hold on. When you were creating Blurred Lines, were you trying to pretend that you were Marvin Gaye?
At that particular time, no. But as I look back, I feel that feeling.
Is it your testimony that you and Mr. Thicke never once during the creation of Blurred Lines spoke about, discussed, referenced the song Got to Give It Up by Marvin Gaye?
I did not go in the studio with the intention of making anything to feel like, to sound like Marvin Gaye.